I'm Oscar Stilmanis and I'm representing Fair Agency Mediju. Today I will introduce with one public fair campaign where we argued against Ministry of Health, which wanted to ban beer advertising on radio and TV, and they wanted to restrict beer advertising from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. in order to reduce alcohol consumption among young people. Our client was Latvian Brewers Association, which represents 3 main breweries in Latvia, with a local market share of 90%. So, imagine a situation, for example, in a nice hockey game, when you lost in the first period 1 against 4, and you have only 2 periods to win the game. The similar situation was in our campaign, because at the beginning we was in a quite bad situation. Why? Because we faced with different challenges. First of all, it's a quite hot topic for Ministry of Health, almost more than 3 years. And at that time they rejected all proposals of the beer industry. Third point, strong alcohol producers also was against beer industry because their main idea is that beer is the first alcohol drink which drive young people. So around this question was quite emotional atmosphere because, as we know, young people and alcohol is a quite sensitive issue in Latvian society. So what was our target? Of course, we want to convince the government to reject beer advertising ban on TV and radio. So, what was our plan and strategy? First of all, we want to find allies among other industries. We want to find the rational arguments in this emotional scene, and we want to show wider also economic perspective of this issue, because that wasn't only a question about the beer. So, as we know, one soldier cannot win the war, therefore we find very influential supporters like Latvian Advertising Association, the Basketball Union, Ice Hockey Federation and Rigas Dinamo, because these are industries which also could suffer from this advertising ban, because the beer industry is a very big business partner for them. So what we did in the pre-phase, because we can divide campaign in 2 parts, preparation part and active phase. And the pre-phase, what we did was a survey, because we want to find other reasons why young people consume alcohol, because we have doubts that that is not only advertising. And we find out that various social and economic conditions also affects alcohol consumption among young people. It's like education, family, and so on. We also made analysis of economic impact on related industries, as I mentioned before, because these industries like sport, advertising, media is a quite big business partners for beer industry. So we also analyzed other European countries' experience, and we found out that they have quite negative experience. And then we start active phase. We send letters to ministers and state secretaries. We also participate at the cabinet meeting where we present our ideas. And we manage a press briefing right after the cabinet meeting. So what was the result? Government rejected the law amendment and obligated the Ministry of Health to consult with all industries to find a joint solution. And in the next 2 days, after the cabinet meeting and press briefings, there was more than 50 publications in media with our arguments. Thank you.
You mentioned that strong alcohol industry objected that young people are drinking beer. So, how did you address these arguments?
They was quite active. Strong alcohol lobbying was quite active in this government meeting and cabinet meeting. But our main argument was that beer, that other conditions is much more important than advertising. And we find out that not only advertising is a main reason which affects why young people choose, for example, beer or some other alcohol, because they don't have any evidence that the beer is the first alcohol which they try. We find out that there is some family when some young people saw that his father or mother drinks some alcohol. It could be champagne or something else, or wine. So we don't know that it's a beer. There was no evidence that it's a beer.
I don't think the size of Latvia is a very small country, did it help you to do this lobbying in this context?
It's quite hard question if we because in other countries, as we saw, there is a beer restriction advertising. So maybe it's a historical some moment in Latvia because beer is traditional alcohol in Latvia and there's a big beer tradition. So I think not this size of Latvia will help, but these beer traditions help us to lobbying system.
So many politicians themselves love beer.
Yeah, that's not the effect of your campaign.
I don't know, we didn't ask any politicians did they like beer or I don't know, maybe vodka or wine.
But have you tried to find a dialogue with the Ministry of Health? Or just to act it from one side?
We discussed it with the Ministry of Health, and as I mentioned, they reject all our proposals. We have a lot of meetings and we send letters and discussions, but there were no reaction because it was, as I mentioned, it was a quite hot topic for Minister of Health. It was one of the main priorities for Minister of Health to introduce this ban restriction. So therefore they were quite aggressive and they didn't listen to our arguments. Therefore we plan more aggressive campaign. We sent a letter where were signs from all these our supporters. And therefore we are going to the cabinet meeting with our supporters. There was representatives from Latvian Basketball Union, from Advertising Association, from mass media, from the biggest companies representatives. So we choose to take aggressive position in this campaign because there were no other reasons how to convince.
And are there any aggressive counterattackers against your campaign?
As I mentioned before, there was some reaction from strong alcohol producers, and the main opposition was Minister of Health and some NGOs.
But why weren't they successful? What do you think? How do you estimate why wasn't state successful? State and their NGOs, the Minister of Health, what was lacking in their communication so that you won the thing? What was the key of your success?
I think they were quite emotional. They didn't have the rational arguments. Of course, they have some numbers, but this data was quite old. It was approximately 10 years old or more data. And as we know, mass media is changing. There's a social media, there's the internet. And if you want to ban beer advertising in television, so young people choose social media, choose internet, watching YouTube, watching satellite television. So there is so much other resources to show beer advertising than why we need to ban advertising in television or for example radio.
And regarding to your answer to this previous question, then is why you fight so much for the advertisement in television and radio if you said that you can met the youngsters on social media?
Because we also use some emotional factor in this campaign because we know that politicians are afraid from mass media. It's a pre-election time and nobody wants to get enemies from mass media. It was the first of all. Secondly, we use sport because in Latvia we know how many people love, for example, hockey. And if, for example, Riga's Nono say, oh, we need this money from the beer industry, because then we will not play, for example, in KHL, or it will affect our participation in the World Championship. So it's quite emotional, and message, and it will help us.
Thank you.
Thank you.